The moment hit like a physical punch. The CEO announced my name from the stage. The crowd erupted in applause. Then Tom stood up. Tom, my VP. He walked confidently toward the stage, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. My jaw clenched as I watched him describe his strategy, the expansion framework, the market penetration approach, the retention metrics, everything I'd built over 6 months of nights and weekends. My initials were literally on the opening slide, EW, right there in the corner. He didn't even flinch, just smiled and gestured at data I'd compiled. I blinked hard, looking around. Nobody was looking at me. Nobody questioning why Tom was accepting my recognition. They thought it was his, all of them. I forced a smile, clapping along with everyone else. But inside, something cold and calculated took over. I was already planning his downfall. My name is Erin Walker. I'm 32 years old, and I'd worked at Atriatech for 3 years. 3 years of being the strategist who made vice presidents look smarter than they were. I'd stayed quiet, professional, humble, never demanded credit too loudly, never made waves. Tom had counted on that. He'd bet his entire theft on my silence and professionalism, on me being too polite to call him out publicly, too worried about my reputation to cause drama. He'd calculated correctly based on my past behavior. But what he didn't know was that this time was different. This strategy was too big, too important, too much of my actual work to let slide. This time, he'd picked the wrong woman. This time, I was done being invisible. This time, I had a plan of my own, and it would destroy him completely. Here's what Tom didn't know. What he stole wasn't the real strategy. What he'd seen on my shared drive was version 2.0, flashy, functional, totally plausible to anyone who didn't understand the deep analytics. But I'd held on to version 3.1, the complete version with accurate metrics and realistic projections. Version 2.0 had missing retention data and a fatal blind spot in the Q3 projections. Anyone who understood the model would eventually see the problems, but it would take weeks to surface, maybe months. Tom had walked confidently onto that stage holding gasoline while thinking it was a spotlight. And all I had to do was wait, let him present it, let him own it publicly, let him defend it to investors and board members who'd ask questions he couldn't answer. Then watch him burn, slowly, publicly, completely. A week after the presentation, Tom called me into his office. He was sweating visibly, his usually crisp shirt wrinkled. The investors had been asking questions he couldn't explain, technical details about customer retention he'd glossed over in the presentation. "You didn't include retention projections in the model?" he barked, trying to sound authoritative. I sipped my coffee calmly. "I didn't know you'd be presenting my work, Tom. I would have briefed you on the gaps if you'd asked." His confident smile faded slightly, the first crack in his armor. "You're going to help me fix this, right?" It was phrased as a question, but delivered like a command. I took another sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. "Of course, if I have time between my other projects." His face reddened. He'd expected immediate compliance, desperation. Instead, I'd given him casual indifference. The power dynamic had shifted. I played the good soldier perfectly, attended his meetings, watched him flounder when investors asked technical questions. I started answering just slowly enough that he'd panic and try to fill the silence himself, usually incorrectly. I let him make wrong calls when choosing between strategic options, never contradicted him directly, just asked innocent questions that highlighted problems he hadn't considered. "That's interesting, Tom. How did you account for seasonal variance in that projection?" He hadn't. Everyone in the room could see it. His credibility was eroding meeting by meeting, and I just watched from the shadows, taking notes, offering minimal help. Meanwhile, something interesting was happening. Investors were starting to call me directly, asking for clarification on details Tom couldn't explain, building relationships with me instead of through him. His control was slipping, and he had no idea how bad it would get. People talk in office lunchrooms. I'd learned that early. One afternoon, I overheard 2 analysts discussing the expansion strategy. "Isn't that Erin's work?" one asked. "The modeling style is definitely hers." The other agreed. Yeah, but Tom presented it. He must have led the project. I don't know. Tom's been really off his game in the follow-up meetings. Doesn't seem to understand his own strategy. I didn't deny anything, didn't confirm, just ate my salad quietly, letting the doubt spread organically. Later that week, the chief operations officer, Marianne, asked to grab time with me one-on-one. No Tom, no formal agenda, just coffee and conversation. I knew what that meant. The people who mattered were starting to ask questions. Tom's theft was beginning to unravel, and I hadn't said a single negative word about him. The work spoke for itself. Marianne didn't waste time with pleasantries. I know you built that expansion model, she said directly. Tom can't answer half the questions I throw at him without calling you or scheduling follow-ups. I didn't nod, didn't confirm explicitly, just said calmly, I want the company to succeed. That's my only goal. We both understood what wasn't being said. She knew, I knew she knew, and she was giving me space to handle this my way. When you're ready to have a different conversation, Marianne said, standing up, I'll back you completely. Just say the word. I smiled. I appreciate that. But I didn't need backing yet. I had something better. I had patience. And I had rope. Lots of rope. And Tom was doing exactly what I'd hoped. He was tying it around his own neck systematically. All I had to do was wait. Let him present it. Let him own it publicly. Let him defend it to investors and board members who'd ask questions he couldn't answer. Then watch him burn, slowly, publicly, completely. Tom started spiraling. His usual confidence dissolved into visible anxiety. He called me constantly. I need the original model, the one you showed me in January. Interesting phrasing. He'd never asked to see anything in January. He'd just taken it. I sent him the outdated deck, the incomplete version 2.0, on purpose. He used it without checking the date. Why would he? He'd never understood the model well enough to notice inconsistencies. The test run with pilot customers failed. Numbers didn't match projections. User retention was half what he'd promised. He looked like a fool in front of the expansion team, tried to blame market conditions, implementation errors, anyone but himself. I watched it all unfold without saying a word. Then I received a meeting request from the CEO. No subject line, no agenda. Just 30 minutes blocked on my calendar for tomorrow morning. Game time. Before the CEO meeting, I ran into Liz, the CEO's executive assistant, in the hallway. She stopped me purposefully. He's angry, she said quietly. The CEO. He thinks you're the reason investors are spooked. I nodded, unsurprised. Tom had been spinning narrative, making me the scapegoat. Let him think that, I replied calmly. Liz raised an eyebrow, studying my face. You're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, aren't you? I smiled slightly. No, Liz, I'm playing the long game. Chess is too short. She laughed quietly. Well, good luck tomorrow. You'll need it. But I didn't need luck. I needed the truth, and I had it. Documented, time-stamped, undeniable. Everything Tom had stolen was about to become evidence of his fraud, his incompetence, his theft. Tomorrow would be very interesting, very satisfying, very final. The CEO's conference room felt cold. Tom was already there when I arrived, red-faced and agitated. She gave me bad data, he snapped before I'd even sat down. Incomplete models, that's why the pilot failed. I sat down calmly, placed my laptop on the table, and looked at the CEO. That's strange, because the complete model was time-stamped and shared with legal 3 weeks ago. Would you like me to pull it up? The CEO leaned forward. Let's see it. I opened my laptop, navigated to the file. There it was. Every metric Tom claimed didn't exist. Every projection he said I'd never provided. Every risk factor he'd ignored. All dated January 15th, 2 months before he'd presented it. The CEO leaned back, his expression darkening. Tom, this isn't what you showed the board. Silence. Heavy. Damning. Tom, the CEO said slowly, did you ever actually understand this strategy? Tom's eyes darted between us. Of course The CEO cut him off. Get out. Now. The aftershocks were immediate and visible. Tom was still technically VP, but his aura was completely gone. People whispered when he walked past. He started hiding in his office, avoiding the common areas. Meanwhile, my desk was suddenly swarmed with executives, asking questions, inviting me to meetings, requesting my input on strategic decisions. Directors who'd never acknowledged me now smiled and asked about my weekend. Suddenly, after 3 years of invisibility, I mattered. My opinion had weight. My expertise was valued. It was surreal, disorienting, vindicating. The company rumor mill was working overtime. Everyone had theories about what had happened in that meeting with the CEO. Most were close to accurate. Then HR sent a company-wide notification, restructuring update meetings scheduled for next week, mandatory attendance. Everyone knew what that meant. Someone was being let go, and everyone knew who. The CEO called me in before the restructuring announcement. We're creating a new role, Director of Strategic Growth. You'd report directly to me. Lead the expansion team, full authority. He paused, watching my reaction. I took my time responding, let the silence build. And Tom? The CEO exhaled slowly. He's transitioning to a consulting role, external, not with the company. Transitioning, corporate speak for fired. I need time to think about the offer, I said. The CEO looked surprised. I thought you'd jump at this. I smiled. I want to make sure the role has real authority, real budget, real power to implement strategy. He nodded slowly. Name your terms, within reason. I'd won, completely, totally. But I wasn't accepting immediately. I wanted him to know my value, to understand I wasn't desperate. I had options now. Power, worth. Everything Tom had tried to steal. Tom cornered me after hours 2 days later. The office was nearly empty. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled. You think you're better than me? His voice shook with rage. I stared at him calmly. No, Tom, I don't think I'm better. I know I'm better, and you proved it for me. His face twisted with anger. You manipulated this entire situation. You're a snake. I laughed, actually laughed. I documented my work. You stole it. I let you fail on your own merits. That's not manipulation. That's consequences. He stepped closer. You'll regret this. I have connections. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. I smiled. Not a chance. You have no credibility left, no references, no reputation. You're done, Tom, and you did it to yourself. I walked away, left him standing there, defeated, finished. Irrelevant. The CEO resigned officially 3 days later, quietly, no announcement. They called it a consulting pivot in the internal email. He packed his office without ceremony. No farewell party, no handshakes, just silence and awkwardness. People avoided his floor. Nobody wanted to be associated with the man who'd stolen credit and failed spectacularly. He left on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a meeting and missed his actual departure. When I walked past his empty office later, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no revenge, just relief. He was gone. The threat was neutralized. But I wasn't done, because there was one more twist, one more piece of justice I'd engineered, and it was about to pay off in the most public way possible. Tom's name was attached to version 2.0, the failed strategy, forever. Publicly, in every company filing and investor document. Legal sent me an email with an interesting subject line, authorship clarification request. The message explained that the failed expansion strategy was still linked to Tom's name in all shareholder documents. Would I like to submit my authored plan, the real version 3.1, for official review, with proper attribution this time? I smiled reading that email. This was the legacy twist. Every failure Tom had caused would remain permanently attached to his name in corporate records, while my actual successful strategy would be filed separately, clean, profitable, proven. His reputation would carry the failure. Mine would carry the success. The public record would show exactly who had built what and who had stolen what. I drafted a response immediately. Yes, please proceed with filing under my authorship. All documentation attached. Justice wasn't just served, it was documented, permanently, in shareholder records, forever. I presented version 3.1 to the full board 2 weeks later, 20 executives sitting around a massive table. I walked them through every metric, every projection, every strategic choice. They asked hard questions. I answered confidently, completely, because I actually understood the model, had built it, lived with it. One board member shook his head. This is what we thought we'd approved months ago. Another added, and to think we almost gave Tom equity compensation for it. The room fell silent. The implications were clear. Tom had nearly profited from stolen work, had nearly received stock options for fraud. If I hadn't exposed him, he'd be wealthy from my labor. That thought hung heavy in the air. The board voted unanimously to implement my strategy. Full budget, full support, full authority. Everything Tom had wanted, everything he tried to steal. Now mine, legitimately, publicly, permanently. The CEO called me into his office one final time before my promotion was announced. I owe you an apology, Aaron. You let Tom hang himself instead of fighting him publicly. That took incredible restraint. I nodded. I didn't want revenge, sir. I wanted justice, sir. There's a difference. He smiled. And now we want you at the helm of this expansion. Full director role, report to me. Build your own team. What do you need? I'd prepared a list, budget requests, hiring authority, decision-making power. He agreed to everything, signed the paperwork right there. Then he said something that made it all worth it. You're going to change this company, Aaron. The way you think, the way you execute. We need more of that. I walked out of his office officially promoted, with real power, real authority, real recognition. Everything I'd earned, everything Tom had tried to steal, now undeniably mine. I moved into my corner office 3 weeks later, Director of Strategic Growth. My name on the door, my team, my budget, my vision. People looked me in the eye now, respected my authority, valued my input, attended my meetings prepared and engaged. The transformation from invisible strategist to recognized leader happened fast, but it felt earned, deserved, right. My first executive decision was restructuring the entire reporting system. No more VPs taking credit for their team's work. Every strategist would present their own projects, get their own recognition, build their own reputations. The policy was approved immediately. Other directors praised it. Young employees thanked me privately. I was changing the culture, protecting others from what Tom had done to me. That felt more satisfying than any revenge could. That felt like legacy, like meaning, like justice that extended beyond one person's downfall. A month later, I attended an industry conference downtown. Massive event, thousands of professionals. I was speaking on a panel about strategic innovation. As I walked through the vendor hall afterward, I saw him, Tom, standing in a small booth in the back corner, lower level, selling contract consulting services, looking diminished, desperate. When our eyes met briefly, he looked away immediately, ashamed, defeated. I walked past him like he didn't exist, didn't acknowledge him, didn't gloat, just continued to my next meeting, because he'd become what I'd once been, invisible, irrelevant, forgettable. Except he'd earned his irrelevance through theft and incompetence. I'd earned my visibility through competence and patience. The difference mattered. The karma was perfect. I never saw him again after that day, and I never thought about him either. He'd become truly invisible, finally. Back at headquarters, the company hung executive photos in the main lobby. Mine was added to the wall beside other directors and VPs, professional, confident, accomplished. Below it, a placard read, Vision, Precision, Integrity. I stood there looking at it for a full minute, thinking about the journey, the theft, the strategy, the patience, the justice. A new hire, fresh from orientation, approached me nervously. "Excuse me, are you Director Walker?" I smiled. Yes. They hesitated, then asked, "Is it true you once let a VP crash his own career just by giving him enough rope?" I laughed quietly. It's true. He stole my work. I let him present flawed strategy. He destroyed himself. I just documented everything and waited. The new hire's eyes widened. That's brilliant. I shrugged. It's just strategic patience. Know your worth, keep receipts, build excellent work. The truth always wins eventually. Several weeks after the restructuring, I received a letter at my office, handwritten, expensive stationery, return address from Tom's neighborhood. My assistant handed it to me with a curious expression. I looked at the envelope, Tom's handwriting. After everything, he was reaching out, probably to apologize, or maybe to blame me one final time, to try manipulating closure from me, to make himself feel better about his failures.
I held the envelope for maybe 10 seconds. Then I walked to the office shredder and fed it through. Didn't open it, didn't read it, didn't give him the satisfaction of my attention. Because I didn't owe him closure, didn't owe him forgiveness, didn't owe him anything at all. Closure comes when you stop caring, when someone becomes so irrelevant their words don't matter. I'd reached that point. Tom was noise, history, forgotten. The shredded letter felt symbolic, final, perfect. I started mentoring young strategists at the company, women especially, those who were told to stay quiet, to let others present their work, to be humble instead of confident. I taught them what I'd learned the hard way. Document everything, timestamp your work, keep copies outside company servers, know your value and never let anyone minimize it. Build relationships with decision makers directly. Don't rely on managers to advocate for you. Be your own champion. One mentee asked if she should confront her manager who'd taken credit for her analysis. I smiled. Document it first, build your evidence, then decide. But remember, revenge is loud and temporary. Strategic positioning is quiet and permanent. Choose wisely. She nodded, understanding. I was changing the culture one person at a time, teaching others to protect themselves, to value themselves, to never accept invisibility. That felt more powerful than destroying Tom ever had. That felt like actual change. People asked me sometimes what the lesson was, what I'd learned from Tom stealing my strategy. I always gave the same answer. I didn't win by yelling louder. I won by staying smarter, staying steady, and knowing my exact worth. They tried to erase me. I wrote myself back in with documentation and patience. The revenge wasn't in watching Tom fail. The revenge was becoming undeniable, becoming so clearly competent, so obviously valuable that nobody could dismiss me again. Not Tom, not anyone. I'd built my reputation on evidence, on results, on strategy that actually worked. That was permanent. That was real power. Not titles, not offices, not recognition, just undeniable competence. Tom had stolen my moment, but I'd built a career, and that career would outlast any moment. That was the real victory. That was the lesson. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming too good to ignore, becoming undeniable, and then building something that lasts.